get well clear of the train and its passengers because I have to say the word finger farts. Farting fingers. Fingerus fartius maximus. We've heard of, bottom farts and brain farts, but finger farts. Making finger farts at the piano in the evening and then revisiting, developing them the next morning into something that is musical. Thanks to Christian Hansen Music for this befitting term. Well, thank you, Brian, for leaving this comment on Mark Isham's Instagram account, which is, as a friend of mine, James, would say, suboptimal. Mark Isham, a real hero of mine, a hero I haven't met. I kind of dread the day I do now, in case he goes, "Oh, you that finger fart guy?" Christian Hansen, finger farter. I should put it as the strapline for all my social media, although I'm not sure anyone would ever voluntarily shake my hands again. Not that finger farting is necessarily a bad thing. It's not a very nice phrase. So I came to London today with a camera, but I've had a kind of bit of a brain busy week this week, so I didn't have a clue what I was going to talk about. Brian, thank you for the inspiration. Finger farts it is. So this conveniently kind of prefaces a question that I'm asked a lot. Well, it's a couple of questions really. It's, where do my ideas come from and how do they form, how do they take shape? Or indeed, where do I find inspiration? I don't know, it's similar to the question, how do you create a hit? Or how do you know when you created a hit? If we knew that answer, it wouldn't be a question. We'd have the golden goose. So my answer to where does inspiration come from? Well, it has to be, I don't know. It reminds me of the time I went to an obstetrician. My little boy was just being conceived. There was this little blinking, it was almost like an LED, little blinking light. And he himself was totally astounded that he could see the spark of life. And when we queried him about it, it became clear that whilst obstetricians and the medical profession understand fertility and what creates a fertile ground and how to support and nurture, that actual point, the spark of life, is still something that isn't understood. So whilst I don't know the answer to the question, where does inspiration come from, I have an idea of how you can prepare a fertile environment for it to strike and what indeed to do when it does strike. Let's talk fertility. Something that frustrates me terribly about medicine is when people talk about physical and mental health like they're kind of mutually exclusive, as if the brain is suspended in some kind of vacuum within your skull, unconnected to your body. When talking about fertility of the mind, I think therefore it's very important to talk about your mental health, and that is connected to your physical health. So contrary to popular belief, working all hours that God sends, taking loads of drugs, drinking too much, eating appallingly, and sitting in a dark room in front of a computer is possibly the worst way to create a fertile environment for inspiration. I'm not going to become some kind of fitness bore. Many of you know that regular daily exercise has only been in my life for about 3 years. This is based on my experience of wallowing in my own shitty nappies in a studio, trying to squeeze out nuggets of inspiration where I should have just gone for a walk in the park. If you're a parent, you look after kids in any given day, if you don't let them go outside and let off steam, they go literally insane. And we're a kind of dialed back version of those children. The place where you do your work, where you seek inspiration, may not be the best place to get it. Earlier this week, I travelled back from London to Edinburgh, and then the next day I had to do a fresh composition for a commercial for a new client. And to be honest, I was just crippled with fear and anxiety. To be candid with you, thought about giving up composing for life and stuff like that. And it was simply because I was not physically and mentally set up for what is quite a difficult task, to conjure up something new that is musical from fresh air to brief. It isn't easy. and I was unprepared. But did it, and it was all fine. So unlike me earlier this week, you've had an early night, a good sleep. You've got out and gone for a nice long walk, you've eaten well, you've not drunk too much, you've not taken loads of drugs. You're ready to get into the place where the magic happens. It isn't where the magic happens. The magic happens up here. I don't know if you saw this week, they actually managed to grow something on the moon, this Chinese thing that they put up there, and they managed to make something sprout. And there's a short while where the environment on the moon was hospitable enough for this kind of spark of life to occur. But then as the moon rotated, it became highly inhospitable and the seedling died. And I think, like kind of fertility for the stuff between your legs, fertility of inspiration relies not only on the state of mind and the state of physicality, the state of your health, it also depends on the environment in which you're working. In order for my working environment to be fecund, it needs to be chaotic. I don't work well in pristine environments. I'm not a massive fan of disorder, but I've learnt to live with it. It is a natural byproduct of my style of flow. I'm kind of a bit of a, I don't know, what's his name? Jackson Pollock. I like to throw things around and just kind of react to sensations because I'm not theoretical. I speak of our studios being a place where the magic happens. They're also the den, the lair of the imposter. Many of us suffer from imposter syndrome, so it's important that our environment offers that important validation that pins us to our seat and keeps us tilling our soil. Which is why having your awards, your film posters, stuff that you've done on display isn't showing off. It's just a necessary means of reassuring you that this is actually your job. You're capable. You've done it before. You can do it again. Full disclosure, that flight was just horrid. I don't know if you've ever enjoyed an aborted landing. The plane goes from this to this, well, that's what it feels like, in roughly 2 seconds. It's a bit disorientating, so I'm going to calm my nerves. Eggy sandwich. So, we've talked about the environment. We can now finally get into the box where the magic that happens there gets translated, your computer. And this is where I just have a couple of observations about how we use our workstations, how we use our samples. And sorry to be kind of nauseatingly repetitive about this. I really do believe if you're looking for inspiration, creating a working environment or a virtual band, if you will, from scratch for any new project is definitely the way to go, and I think many people will support me on that. I'd go just one step further and say creating your own sample library is fantastic, but also, Spitfire started making a lot of kind of character-based libraries, and the whole idea of those are to provide sparks of inspiration. And it's interesting because on this very day, someone on the comment section of a much older video, which I've linked above, thank you, asked me about, just dropped my shopping, sorry, asked me about whether there was any value in having these kind of mega templates versus these smaller templates. And remember, we have two jobs. First being head of department, that's actually what we get paid for. The second being a composer. And there are points in everyone's careers where we're more of one than the other. Point in question, possibly if you get kind of airdropped into a project where a composer's been fired, unfortunately, and you're coming in as the cavalry. Now, at that point, you don't have time to put together your virtual band, to till your soil, to go and wander up mountains and all of that kind of stuff. You've just got to kind of go and hit the ground running. And I think it's really good at those points to have a big template ready where you can just go and grab your favourite sounds and use your standard chops. I think that we've all done those jobs and have kind of had the sense of, well, I'm not going to win a BAFTA for this one, but it is a banker in the sense that if you really do help out a producer or a director or a studio, you'll be seen in a good light further down the line. I do, however, feel that the danger of using big, large templates is that you are providing an environment that can stagnate, and I'm speaking not through judgment but through experience of myself. A particularly kind of, I'd say, weak patch in my creativity and inspiration was when I was working in this studio that I kind of mentioned before, which was purpose-built, pristine, using a mega template with about 700 tracks in, and every single piece of music I made sounded the same. So you've got all these things in place. I think it's also really important to prime yourself, and by this I mean is understand your own kind of creativity and how it flows. I think the best way of doing this is just analysing when your best kind of bouts of inspiration hit. For me, regrettably, it's usually just as I'm about to leave the studio. I don't know if this happens to a lot of you. It's my theory as to why many marriages fail. I think that for some reason, just as you're about to leave, you're promising you're going to pick up some nice shopping on the way home, it strikes, and then inevitably what you end up doing is working into the evening whilst that kind of seam of creativity flows. I was speaking to a clinical psychologist about creativity and inspiration, and their theory was best form of creativity happens when you are in the moment. And I think that is the problem for us. I think that we have so many other things to think about, to deal with, distractions, the internet, emails, etc., that the moment when we're actually going, I'm just looking for my keys because I'm going to head off, is the moment where it hits. Your brain is clear for that creativity to flow. Something else I've had to embrace is the fact that procrastination is part of my life and will remain such. I've seen it over the years as a massive affliction, but I think having spoken to many people about this, I've drawn some slightly more positive conclusions. Firstly, I think it's actually part of the process, as in we're processing the idea, the concept, we're priming ourselves to create. Secondly, I think it is a way of avoiding, being an avoidant, and I think what we're avoiding is fear, because I think we do, many of us, actually fear writing music. It's fearful, it's scary, because when inspiration strikes, we don't know if it has or hasn't. I'm going to have an idea, and then I have to be kind of a judge and juror over it. It's terrifying. So the other reason, and the reason I know I procrastinate, is to simply run out of time. So when I write something, create something, or am inspired, I have no choice in the matter. That's what I need to work up. One of the rare things that Spitfire has afforded me, so I've just already made my coffee, is I've met just literally hundreds of composers. And I have to say, if I think about it hard, it's only one person I've met who is quite clearly not a procrastinator. I don't want to tell tales on my friends. I think some of us are afflicted more than others. But I did hear from the horse's mouth that Steve Reich, massive procrastinator. So we're in good company. I think one of the difficulties about inspiration is actually knowing when it strikes. I always think inspiration's like a cricket ball covered in lard. Difficult to catch, and when you've got it in your hand, it's difficult to hold on to. If we think about the most famous movie music moments, just have a think about what that shard of inspiration would have felt like. For example, dun-dum. It's a fucking semitone. Inception. The fear of capturing something like that and going, yes, that's going to become a trope, is a terrifying one. You know, talking about us suffering from imposter syndrome, probably having low self-esteem, to one, come up with an idea, and then two, to actually genuinely think it's good, is a tricky one. They are finger farts. It's literally, it comes out of nowhere. That's what's so difficult about what we do, because it seems so inconsequential. And I think the thing that I've seen so many times is people abandon really good ideas, people overcomplicating really beautifully simple and strong ideas. So for me, you know, I've got a practice which this guy alluded to in the comment on Mark Isham's Instagram, which is called charcoal sketching. So I understand that I'm going to procrastinate all day. I understand that the moment I decide that I want to go to the pub is the moment that it's going to strike. When it strikes, I just fucking tape it. And I'm going to work on a cue. I've got, oh, great theme idea. There's something in that. No one will ever hear one of these charcoal sketches. I have spoken about these before. I lock up the studio and I return at 4 o'clock in the morning when I am at my most productive. What's great about that is I can think about the things, the way that the oboe's going to take this, the bassoon will take that line, and I'll do that. Oh, actually, maybe I shouldn't do that thing. I should maybe, invert the melody at that point. That's what I'm thinking about when I'm in the bath. I don't have the white screen syndrome. I go into the studio 4 o'clock in the morning and I work that up. And usually by the time my kids are up at 7, that'll be pretty much my working day done. I will tend to procrastinate or have distractions for the rest of the day, at which point, just before going to the pub, I'll have my next good idea. My ideas, unfortunately, cannot always be brilliant, but it's not an excuse to abandon a strong idea or to overwork a weak one. My best theme that I've ever written is probably on the worst film ever made in the history of cinema. Look at The Mission by Ennio Morricone. I cannot think of an album that so many people have that accompanies a film that no one has ever seen. Actually, I have, and it's fucking awful. To adopt best business practices is to do business plans, which are not just financial plans, but just planning for the future. Something I've learned in Spitfire is to take the current model, the current workflow, and imagine that upscaled. So in the case of Spitfire, I don't know, a good example is we go to the pub, or used to go to the pub and have a pizza. We do that once every 2 weeks. And someone pointed out, what happens when you've scaled up to 200 people? So it's simply unscalable in a very basic practical sense. And I think that that's what we need to apply to developing a workflow. Is, okay, well, is this going to work when I've got 5 movies on and I've got less time to work, this, that, and the other? Those indulgences, those poor practices of overworking poor ideas, abandoning poor ideas, or indeed procrastinating ourselves into an early grave. The conclusions for me is, I feel it's not good to work out of your bedroom. I have worked from home before. I think when you're in a partnership, it's very difficult to create a work boundary if you're working from home. But I also love being close to my family. So I've done both working out my bedroom, working out my living room, and working out of Tileyard Studios, a totally separate place, in fact, on a different side of the river to my family, and have come to the conclusion that the kind of halfway mark, a shed at the end of the garden, is the way that I like working. I often work in a messy environment and have now embraced the need to procrastinate, but in a measured and balanced and sustainable way. I also understand that sometimes I will not be best prepared to be creative, and at that point will probably want to give everything up and run away to kind of Canada. But that is just who I am. It's a bit of a kind of mouth fart, this vlog, isn't it, really? Anyway, thanks as always for watching. I'd really love to hear about your kind of energy cycles. Are you an early bird or are you a night owl? How do you battle procrastination, and how do you catch that cricket ball covered in lard when it slaps you in the palm of your hand? Thanks as always for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. A thumbs up if it hasn't been too waffly for you would be great. And if you want to be notified the next time I have a cup of coffee and a sit on a mountain, hit that bell. See you next time. Whew.